going to start after the meeting at 9.
Okay.
I'm assuming the meeting is going to end, hoping before 9.
I think so.
You and me both.
Yes.
Wink, wink.
Yeah. All right, it's 6:45. I'll
Optimistic.
call this River Edge Board of Education meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Ms. Brown? Ms. Crespo? Ms. D'Alessandro? Here. Mr. Frias? Here. Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Mr. Sim? Mr. Langley?
Here. Can I get a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
Roll call, please.
Oh, Ms. D'Alessandro?
Yes.
Mr. Frias? Yes. Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Sim's not here yet. Mr. Langley?
Yes. All right, we'll reconvene at 7:30. Okay. All right, it's 7:30. I'll reconvene Board of Education. Roll call number 2, please. Should we do the flag salute first?
We have to.
We'll do the roll call first.
Ms. Brown? Ms. Crespo? Ms. Delisandro?
Here.
Mr. Frias?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Mr. Sim?
Here.
And Mr. Langley.
Here. Let's all rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Frias, would you mind reading the mission statement, please? Just be able to click on it. We didn't edit it yet.
The River Edge School District is a partnership of students, parents, staff, and community members. We are dedicated to providing a supportive environment in which all students can reach their maximum academic potential while developing as responsible citizens who respect individuality. Our goals will be achieved because curriculum and instruction are aligned with the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. All decisions reflect the academic, social, emotional, and physical needs of pre-K to 6th grade students. Cooperation and ongoing communication exists between the school district and the community. School administrators and the Board of Education work together to assess and adjust procedures in response to new mandates and the changing needs of the community.
Thank you. Open public meetings, notice.
Pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this meeting, its date, time, and place have been delivered to the post office, the municipal building, and the record, and posted on the district website at least 48 hours prior to the time of this meeting.
Thank you. We'll open up for public comments on agenda items only. Seeing as how there are none, we will move on to the 25-26 budget presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Everyone has a hard copy that's here, and we don't need to do the projector, but what we'll do is we'll,
Yeah, we can do it that way.
yes, okay. No, you don't need it.
Will it be projected at home then?
Yes.
You got it at home? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a split, the YouTube will show up as a split screen. Yeah,
Great.
this way we don't have to move. Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. This is the preliminary budget presentation for 25-26 academic year. So one of the elements of strategic planning that we discovered is that people believe that the mission statement is important, and about half of the respondents thought that we did a good job about edifying people about the mission statement, but there was some room for improvement there. So in discussion with some of the board members and in committee, I think that when strategic planning is over, we'll take a look at some of that data and go ahead and look at the mission statement. But there it is, and we already read it once. So this is the statement that governs our thinking as we go ahead and look at the finances for the next year. One of the things that is important, and I'll say this, anyone who's ever listened to me do a budget presentation before has heard me say it. When I was studying in school of finance at St. John's, my professor was very adamant in saying that if you were to show him a school budget, he can tell you where a district's priorities are. And there's very little discretionary spending that's in a school budget. But if you were to dismantle that discretionary spending, you can very easily go ahead and see what is actually important to a school district. So I think this budget reflects the things that are important to the school district, and we'll go over what those things are now. Before we go ahead and look at the specificity of the finances, I wanted to go ahead and just highlight elements of pride or things that I think we do well. I was very impressed upon arrival here, and in fact, I was tipped off before when I told someone I was coming to River Edge. They're like, "Oh, they do such a great job with their data management." And I understand that River Edge, and still, it's a fact that River Edge was one of the first 10 Linkit customers when they were unveiling their product. I think a dozen years ago. So, but because it's been such a deep part of the culture here for so long, I think that River Edge probably, for a district our size, is using these data the most effective I can actually imagine, in that not only our classrooms teachers are using this information, but we use the information that we upload to the data warehouse very carefully as we go ahead and make small groups and decide who needs tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 interventions. And those kind of take shape not only daily in the classroom, but in push-ins, but then in our, I'll call them tier 3 interventions, which are the most supportive, which are the WIN programs, the PDIA, and things like gifted and talented also are included in that, right? It's just any support that is additional would really be considered something that's tier 3. And those things detailed there are governed by these data. So I think that we do data-driven decision-making really well. I was asked recently, and I was thinking about the same thing, probably in a future meeting. I'm not sure if it'll be the next one or the one after, but I asked Brooke Geller, our supervisor of assessment, innovation, and special projects, as a special project, but also as an assessment, to go ahead and really try to use the data that we have to predict how our students are going to do on NJSLA in the spring. Hard to do, but I asked her to do some fancy mathematics to try to help us with that. And then B, knowing how the students are going to do, and knowing the students that we have in not only supports and WIN, but and the after-school PDIA programs, how are we doing with those students? Do we believe, and it's hard to tell, but do we believe that those students, as a product of those interventions, I'll call them, are doing either better or worse? So I think that the board should see that, the public should know how that's doing. I have her collecting that data. There's a draft of that report on my desk, and we'll do that at a future meeting. I think that's something good for you folks to see, because it does cost money, and it is something that we do extraordinarily well. So that's a future meeting, but this is a point of pride. There's some other things here that are quite impressive, actually, but you can read them there on the slide. Some of these are things that we do weekly or monthly, and then others are less frequent, but equally as important. Oh, right now we're doing the Shark Tank. I happen to be a shark for the Shark Tank. We did the Roosevelt, the Cherry Hill one's coming up next week. I understand the final includes board members, so you all have that to look forward to. It was quite an event. I prepared by watching Shark Tank for the last 10 years, but so I felt overly prepared for that particular activity. But also in professional learning, here are some things that I believe that we're doing well. And even today, we had to amplify Desmos Math on site with our teachers, prepping the K-3 teachers for next year. So we have a very robust professional development activity or activities that are very frequent. Bill Jackson's been with the district for a long time. I understand. I sat through one of his presentations. Wildly fascinating. I was like, oh, is that how you do that kind of mathematics? And then, of course, Patty McGee has been with us for a while too, and she continues her work with our teachers. So I talked a little bit about what a budget is, and a budget tells a story about the district's priorities and what exactly is important to us and what are the things that we can do. So it requires quite a bit of effort to make a budget work. So the planning starts as soon as the budget's approved. The next budget starts. The next budget planning cycle kind of begins, and we look at our priorities often and what things are important. What do we have to do? And we'll talk more about that later when we talk about CUSAC. What do we like to do? Things that we do additionally, and then what are some things that we believe are wildly important as a school district to go ahead and do? So there's those three parts of things that we. Activities that we ask the children to participate in daily that we have to go then and set as instructional priorities. After that, we have to figure out how to pay for them. That's the purpose of the second half of the presentation tonight. And then we go ahead and plan those things. We go ahead and pay for them, make them happen, And then once we find that they're successful or that we like them, and it could be something as simple as teaching mathematics, which is a requirement, we have to make sure that we can continue to do that, right? And how do we do it well? Those are the questions that we have to keep asking ourselves. And then this cycle continues to spin annually, but it's taking place all the time. So these action plans are aligned with our goals, strategic plan, which of course we're still working on, more on that later. And the long-range facility plan is something that has to also be considered, because those things, there's like $20 million in improvements that we have to look at over the next 10 years. So those are things that we're constantly looking at. A transparent, not only budget, but then expenditure reporting is good for the taxpayers. It gives accountability to the school district, but also let people visibly see what's happening for their tax dollar. And we have to make sure that we're satisfying all state and the federal mandates, and that we have approval to go ahead and spend the money, which is taking place this month after tonight, and then we go ahead and submit the budget to the Executive County Superintendent and his office for approval.
I'll take the next few slides about the budget process. We assess the needs with the administration. We sit down with all the administrators, see what do our students need. We meet in committee. The curriculum committee we've discussed in personnel and management has also discussed the budget, and finance and facilities obviously also, various other stakeholders, and we looked at different revenue sources. We identify capital improvements that we could do in the future, what needs to be done, what's in the long-range facility plan, how do we keep the building running. We don't want any surprises, because our budgets are standalone every year. We have no other way to achieve monies to fix anything or do any other improvements. We present and vote on the tentative budget, which would be tonight after state aid was released on the 27th, so it's a very quick turnaround from when you find out how much money you have and how much money you will get. We did do flat state aid. When state aid was released on the 27th, we did have a loss of 3%, which was $97,848. So we quickly, we had Plan B, and we quickly moved to Plan B. The full budget hearing and the full public hearing and vote is on May 7th. So that will be, tonight you'll be voting on the tentative budget. On May 7th, you'll be voting on the final budget. But you do have all the information you need this evening. The next thing I'm going to talk about shared service. Shared service is part of your budget. It's looked at fondly by the DOE because they want to see districts use shared service and hopefully save money. So we use Region 5 for special education, transportation, and related services. We have a partnership with the Borough of River Edge for snow removal and gas. The next item is NESBIG, which is an insurance JIF, which we're in a group with other school districts in that JIF for our insurance. Ed Data Services allows us to buy school supplies at a reduced cost. ACES is energy services. That's another thing, so we save money by being part of that cooperative. We were told to budget 17% for rising energy costs for next year. If we got both gas and electric through ACES, they said to budget 15%, which is what we did. Bergen County Technical Services, we use them for our upper level technology needs. ESC&J and PEPM are for state contracts for some of the equipment and supplies we buy. And we partner with the Chief of Police and the Borough for our SLEO 3 officers. The next slide describes our revenues. So what we did this year, I know we had some cuts last year, is we looked a little more closely at some of our revenues to see how we could make up some of these differences. We were eligible for a health care adjustment, which you'll be voting on this evening. The health care adjustment is because the health care went up half of last year because it works on a fiscal year, not a school year. It went up almost 19% for the second half of the year. And for next year, it's projected at going up another 15%. So we were eligible for a health care adjustment. So that is figured in there. That would be a tax increase of 4.49%. We're only allowed to go over the 2% because of that health care adjustment. Tuition and miscellaneous revenues, that's basically tuition. We built this building, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, about NBC and our debt service for the referendum you did to build this building. When you built NBC, you built it with the purpose for using it for our gen ed students and also for our special ed students, so that we could educate our special education River Edge students in district so they could be with their siblings and their peers, and also use it as a revenue source to take out of district students and place them here, which is what we do. So I have budgeted in here a little bit higher for, we do have additional tuition students. That's not a guarantee because each year they fill out their contract, so it's not a promise, but these are students that have been enrolled already in the program. We have pre-K here, and so we have pre-K tuition from the gen ed population. Interest on investments, we've been investing some of that capital reserve money while we're waiting to spend it in some long-term CDs. And we have been able to put more money aside for that purpose. So I've budgeted a little bit higher, not a little bit higher, a lot higher because of the CDs that we've invested in. Budgeted fund balance, that amount is the amount that you keep from this year's budget. So every year we make sure we have at least the $500,000 and we roll it into next year's budget. Miscellaneous receipts would include the aftercare, which pays us a portion to hold the aftercare here to keep the building running. We have Gov Deals when we sell some of our outdated Chromebooks or equipment. That money goes in there. Region 5, there's a fee that we get also from Region 5 for being the LEA, so that's in there too. Now you can see the aid. So this is the February 27th number that I talked about coming out. So you can see the difference from last year to this year. The first one, extraordinary aid, is what we budget that each year at 130. You remember last board meeting we allocated additional monies that we got in extraordinary aid in this year's budget, which we're allowed to do. But the next 4 items, which is the categorical transportation aid, special ed aid, equalization aid, and security aid, went up and in some cases disappeared in one line. So it was all due to the formula from the state and how they configured how they were going to give aid out. So that produced that net effect of that negative about $98,000. The special revenue funds for state projects, that's the money that we handle for the non-public schools. So all their purchase orders come through us. That's their security aid and their nurses, and we handle all the purchases for the non-public schools, which would be the Yeshiva and St. Peter's. ESEA are your title funds, and some of that goes to River Edge, and some go to the St. Peter's and to the Yeshiva also, and we do handle that for them also. IDEA is your federal money. That's special ed, there's basic and preschool, and we budget for that each year based on the prior year's money. The last item is taxes for debt service, the repayment of our debt, and that is the total amount there, and I have a slide later to go into further detail about that item. The next slide shows additional sources of revenue and contribution. So as I said before, it's the Region 5 LEA fee, the tuition for out-of-district students, the preschool, AlphaBest, our interest from our jumbo CDs. Obviously, we have our PTOs are great contributors, and they support our schools. So we thank them for their support. This year, there weren't that many grants. Last year, if you remember, there was a full slide of grants, and this year, the only one that's available is the high impact tutoring grant of $5,923, which we will be using for tutoring. This shows the cost per pupil. After you put your budget in, it calculates your expenditures and your costs, and it gives you a cost per pupil. So this shows you that in our proposed budget, the cost per pupil is $18,287. The 23-24 average cost per pupil in New Jersey, just to weigh it with some measure, is $20,154. The next slide shows you our expenditures. So these are subcategories, so there's a lot of categories in these lines. Just some of the highlights or lowlights where we've gone up and down. When you have a small line item, a percentage could look very big, and it's not really a lot of money. We had, the guidance went down 17.48%, but that was because we had a mental health clinician, if you remember last year. We didn't know if we were going to need some supports this year, so we had left some money in that line. We took it out this year to make the budget balanced. Child study team was some reconfiguration of some staff. Some of the other items were, the instruction line that went down 2.41%, we offset with a little bit more additional IDA money, which we get anyhow, so we made sure that we put that in there. I think basically that's the highlights and lowlights of most of that. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them and break down some of the lines better, but this is all in the user-friendly budget that will be posted after you vote for it. The next slide, and Dr. Bernice pulled this out of the office. I was very happy to see this picture.
I was going to say, that's cool.
Yeah, so this is your referendum in NBC when it was built, so that's what helped build our building here.
Cherry Hill.
Oh, sorry, Cherry Hill, excuse me. Yeah, look at that. So the 25-26 budget does not include capital reserve projects. However, monies have been appropriated in the prior year budget for the new boiler at Cherry Hill. Roosevelt's boiler project was completed in the summer of '24. These projects are covered under ROD grants, which is a 40% reimbursement for the state. Just so you know, we wait a little while for that reimbursement. So you have to wait till the project's complete, then you fill out numerous sheets of paperwork for the government and wait for your money to come back, so it takes a little while. The long-term debt. Your long-term debt is expiring in 31-32. So the total of your bonds, you have 2 bonds currently. One of them, if you remember, we did a bond refunding not too long ago and got a lower interest rate. But the total is $9,275,000. The interest is $1.4 million. Debt service aid comes out each year, so the total is 10.7. Debt service is given each year when state aid comes out. And there's the picture, sorry, of NBC that you built with your referendum money. For this year, just to give you an example, $1.1 million in principal and $298,000 in interest, minus debt service aid that comes off your state aid number that comes off there. And so you're paying $1,125,304 in your taxes for that building that you built. This slide just shows a picture of last year, if you remember. State aid was decreased by 13.66%. We lost $516,000. This year by an additional $97,848. So that shows you how state aid was low. We started getting more money, and then it's dropping back down again. We talked about a little bit last year why we lost state aid. The contribution is a funding formula based on the wealth of the people in the town that live in the town and the property values, and that gives them the local fair share. Unfortunately, we are only allowed to go up 2% per year. So while they say we're a richer community and the local fair share can be higher, we don't have a mechanism to get more of the local fair share. The only mechanism we had this year was the healthcare adjustment, or if you decided to do a project and did a referendum for it. This is the enrollment that shows the enrollment has been declining. You saw there was a steep decline basically after COVID, and then it's gradually gone back up, but gone down again. It's based on the population, who's moved into town, who's stayed in town, births. We have a demographic study that was done that pretty much aligns with these numbers of what we're seeing here. And your funding, your school funding, is based on your student population. So we don't have an enrollment adjustment because we don't have a large number of students. This is the estimated costs to local taxpayers. This data I should have for the final budget to show you what actually this means for each taxpayer. We do a calculation. Your town was just reassessed, as you probably all know. The reevaluations are not all done. This data was not available yet. I had called the town. They had asked for an extension. So we don't have this information, but by the final budget vote, I can tell you how it will affect, and how we say is it affects the average home in the town. For more information, after tonight's vote, it will go to the county for approval. Then we will post, it will be in the newspaper. We'll post it on our user-friendly budget. I'll have copies of it in the board office upstairs during business hours. Anyone could come and get it. Or you can contact Dr. Bernice or myself.
If I could, I'd just like to point out that there was, just rolling into the budget, for regular contractual increases that we were seeing for this year, it was over $300,000 that needed to be found. And then when we got hit with the state aid decrease, we were looking at nearly over $400,000 of money that needed to be found. That was found by Ms. Napolitano here, but this budget works because we mostly looked at what our revenues were, and we increased the revenue side of the budget. So the revenue side, not so much the expenditure side, which is why we're not sitting here right now talking about $400,000 in cutting programs and staff and equipment. So by increasing those revenues through the items that Ms. Napolitano, why am I having so much trouble with that? Napolitano detailed earlier, that's how this works. The danger, it has to be said, the danger in doing that is that if those revenues decline in some way in the following year, you need to find that money, and then you might have to start looking at the expenditure side of things, which we were very thankfully, we really didn't have to dig too far in the expenditure side of things to make this work. So thank you for your due diligence and making this.
And the other issue is you don't have, that money would have fallen off at the end of the year into your capital reserve account, which we have been building. When I got here 8 years ago, it was $675,000. Now we have quite a bit of money in there, almost $4 million, that we've built up to do these projects and take care of our buildings. We don't have any way to fund more capital projects. That money that's in there, that extra money would have fallen into your capital reserve account, which is what you want to do because you have no other way of getting capital reserve monies.
And then the capital reserve money allows us to invest that money in these large CDs, which is what allowed us to go ahead and increase the revenue line for interest. If we start, we had a long discussion about this. If we decide to do a large project, a large building project that involves the withdrawing from that capital reserve account, we will not be able to invest the money in the manner in which we're doing right now. Therefore, the interest rate, the interest that we're able to collect will start to decline. So we're on this like very, it's like the seesaw outside, the children don't know it, but they're getting an economics lesson as they're playing on the seesaw. We have to very carefully manage the funds that we have, $4 million, which sounds like it's pretty good, but not really up against what we know is $20 million of projects. But if we go ahead and say, fine, we're going to take a $4 million chunk out of that $20 million right now, we're not going to have the revenue money on the interest side. So we have to be very careful about how we manage those funds.
But it's still better to have and hold the money and then spend it as opposed to going out and borrowing the money and then paying interest. Still better.
Much better.
But you have to watch. Yeah.
I have a question about the grants. You said we had more. Is that just what's out there, what's available to us, or did we just not go for certain things yet?
There really isn't any additional
That
ones.
we
So
could
we
get.
did the tree grant, if you remember last
Yes.
year. We did the COPS grant,
grant.
which we got. We have 3 ROD grants out there for the 3 projects, which we were very happy to get from the federal government. So, and all the COVID grants, those ESSER monies that
Right.
allowed us to fix our infrastructure, buy some Chromebooks, do some other projects, that money is dried up now. So that's really all. That's anything that's available, I always do look for, but there's really not much right now. Thank you.
other questions? All right. We'll move on to superintendent's report.
Good evening again. We can go ahead and fill that. You can bring it back to the regular screen. Thank you. You just heard a lot from us, so I won't belabor this too long. I want to thank everyone who participated in the professional development day today. There were over 20 opportunities offered to the staff at varying levels, and I already heard some very positive feedback from those things. I think that there's a survey, so we'll gauge how those things went. I do want to point out that pre-K to 3 family math night is tomorrow night here at Cherry Hill School from 6:30 to 8. That's tomorrow. Friday, I'm going chronologically tonight, tomorrow, Friday. Friday is the district's formal triannual CUSAC inspection. Just to explain what that is first, I know most of you know, but the New Jersey Quality Single Accountability Continuum, NJCUSAC for short, is the state's monitoring and evaluation system for all public school districts. It ensures that districts provide a thorough and efficient education by assessing performance in 5 key areas: instruction and program. This includes curriculum alignment, student achievement, and instructional effectiveness; fiscal management, which includes budgeting, fiscal controls, and resource allocation; governance, which is board operations, policies, and district leadership; operations, which is facilities management, student safety, and technology; and the 5th is personnel, which is staffing, hiring, and professional development. We, as a district, have to complete a self-assessment that then gets reviewed by the NJDOE county office, and then they come and monitor us either through desk audit, which they have already done some of that, and the formal visitation. They want to make sure that we're actually still here, which we are, evidently, but they will ensure of that on Friday. And we need to get an 80% or higher in each of these categories to be considered passing in that category. If we fall below those thresholds, which I don't predict, we are placed on a correction action plan for those elements only. The CUSAC evaluations, again, occur every 3 years. So we've already poured a ton of hard work into this inspection, if you will. So I want to thank the entire staff for their daily hard work. All the staff, everyone works on these things every single day, but also in the intense preparation for this monitoring. When I found out that this was going to be a monitoring year, I immediately kind of stood up a meeting, and we've had a number of meetings since August, but we started this work in August. It is now March, and we're just coming to the inspection. I believe that at this point we're as ready as we're ever going to be. They can ask us for a whole bunch of things on Friday, but I feel as if we're ready, we're equipped to answer their questions on Friday well enough. And there are many key people who participate in this, the intense preparation, and I'll thank them when we get our letter. The final community input night for the strategic planning effort is on Thursday, the 20th of March, right here in this room at 7 p.m. The report from the last meeting, I suspect, will go out tomorrow. We now have it from Dr. Murphy, and I'll go ahead and send that out the same way I have been, with a short text blast, email blast, same thing, and live feed with a link to the full report, which is about 4 or 5 pages of text. And he does a very nice job on that. That will be the last community. This week will, well, I'm sorry, the 20th will be the last community input night. There'll be one more report after that, and then finally there'll be a final presentation to the board about what the strategic planning looks like. Most of the work after the 20th is with the administrative team as we go ahead and develop the actual action plans based on the goals that have already been formulated from the last meeting. The last thing I have to say in my report tonight is that I do want to recognize a retirement. This is the person sitting to my right. We will have lots of time to say goodbye. I thought it would have been silly to do this twice, but the board is at my recommendation, and I wanted to put protest next to that. But we will, the board will be accepting Luann's retirement letter this evening, and we'll have lots of time to say goodbye. And we'll do a last lecture meeting at her last meeting. I thought it was a lot to do 2 of that, 2 last lectures. That's not a last lecture at all. But thank you for your service, Luann, and it's been awesome working with you, and we'll go ahead and say more of that over the next couple of months. Okay, that concludes my report.
Any other questions from board members? Board Secretary?
Thank you, all of you, and thank you. I've enjoyed working with all of you, and I thank Dr. Bernice for the time, too. And I've enjoyed being a part of River Edge. I didn't live here, but I feel like I did live here. Some days I did live here a little bit more than I did in my own town, but I do love River Edge, and your community has been wonderful to work with. The state certified tuition rates are on the board agenda tonight for you to approve. That's based on the auditor doing an A4142 calculation, which is actually on the cost of the program. We did, tonight on the agenda is the RFP for aftercare, which was discussed in committee and in closed. And also for Region 5, there was an RFP for a billing service provider that you will be approving this evening that was approved by the Budget Committee.
Any other questions? No? President's report, I just have a couple things. I attended a Welcome Ramadan event on the 28th at the library. It was really lovely. It was very nice. They had some nice speakers. The mayor was there. A couple other people were there. So I wanted to say thank you to Omar Hassan for inviting me. I also attended the Read Across America on the 7th last Friday. So I wanted to say thanks to Miss Ariema and her first grade class for listening to me read How to Talk Like a Chicken. It was a great book. They liked it. No, Bagak. No. And then just one other housekeeping item. The meeting on April 30th is being moved to the 7th, which you already knew about. Our plan is to start that meeting at 6 p.m. instead of 6:45 because we have some additional personnel items to go over. As opposed to scheduling a separate special meeting, we figured it might be better, but we'll have some sandwiches or something. But if anybody has a big conflict or an issue with 6 o'clock, just let me know separately.
What was that date?
The 7th, 5/7.
So no longer April 30th, now it's 5/7.
Yeah, that meeting was moved for scheduling, and then also we're going to start early to do the personnel stuff.
6 o'clock.
At 6, yes. And that concludes my report. So we'll move on to committees. Finance and facilities, Alethea is not here, but pretty much everything on the agenda we already discussed and closed, and we talked about the budget. So that's the report on finance and facilities. Curriculum and instruction. Lauren?
Curriculum instruction met on March 10th for 1 hour. Dr. Bernice was present along with Mr. Langley and myself. We followed up with the math curriculum rollout being PD being paid for from this current year's funds. We worked on policy updates for programs. The Chromebooks for the K-3, I think we're approving that on the agenda tonight. And we discussed any budget impacts to curriculum instruction, and the increased revenue items were discussed. Strategic planning meeting, we reviewed the notes and how to incorporate in the future. We're looking for a new date for April. We don't have one yet.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No. Personnel and management. Mr. Cohen.
So the Personnel and Management Committee met on March 10th for 1 hour from 5:30 to 6:30. Thank you for Ms. Napolitano for substituting in as the secretary for taking some of the notes. We reviewed 4 items, the budget, which was just presented today. We briefly reviewed the policies that we will be reviewing, and we initiated review on policy 1120. We discussed and scheduled a possible date to review tenure and non-tenure reviews, and briefly discussed the upcoming CUSAC, which is this Friday.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to items to be acted upon. Can I have a motion for items E1 through 3?
I'd like to make a motion.
As stated, okay, no problem.
Second.
Any discussion? No? Roll call, please.
Ms. D'Alessandro?
Yes.
Mr. Frias?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Sim?
Yes.
And Mr. Langley?
Yes. Can I have a motion for F1 through 2?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Delisandro?
Yes.
Mr. Frias?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Sim?
Yes.
And Mr. Langley?
Yes. Can I have a motion for H 1 through 9?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? No, roll call, please.
Ms. Delisandro?
Yes.
Mr. Frias?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Sim?
Yes.
And Mr. Langley?
Yes. Can I have a motion for I 1 through 7?
Motion to approve motion I 1 through 7 with great appreciation for a resignation that is within those.
Retirement.
Sorry?
Retirement.
The retirement.
Yes.
Retirement.
Second.
Any other discussion?
So where is that retirement? I mean, I'm looking at the,
Ms. Delisandro?
Yes.
Mr. Frias?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes. and
Mr.
thank you.
Sim?
yes.
And Mr. Langley?
Yes. Can I get a motion for J 1?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Delisandro?
Yes.
Mr. Frias?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Sim?
Yes.
And Mr. Langley?
Yes. Can I have a motion for the Region 5 K 1 through 12?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Delisandro?
Yes.
Mr. Frias?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Sim?
Yes.
And Mr. Langley?
Yes. Does anybody have any new or old business they wish to bring up? No? We'll move on to public comments on non-agenda items. And seeing that there aren't any, we will move on. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So I'd like to say,
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to speak. I'd like to thank Ms. Napolitano for her service. I've been in the city for about 11 years, and I told her this when I spoke to her about her retirement. I think she's the one factor that we've had the whole time that I've been here, and I think she's pretty much held it together for us. So thank you, Ms. Napolitano.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
That's all.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Delisandro?
Yes.
Mr. Frias?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Sim?
Yes.
And Mr. Langley?
Yes. All right, we'll be back on May 7th.